All right, let's go ahead and add some CG, starting with the astronauts. We're in the main work here. I've turned off the other stuff we're working on. I've already brought in the passes that we're going to use. We have the main beauty render, which includes all the passes baked in. We have a diffuse lighting pass. We have a puzzle mat that we can use to mat out different areas. We've got reflections. We've got shadows, and we've got specular. All right, so we're going to use all these passes, kind of put them all together to make our astronauts. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make a solid, immediately pre-comp that, and we'll call this CG astronauts. All right, and we're just going to go ahead and let's just bring all of them in here, and we will kind of work on reordering these a bit. At the very bottom, we'll have the main CG, and we'll use that as a reference throughout, but we're actually going to kind of rebuild it with the passes, individual passes, instead of using the final one. So I'm going to have the diffuse be near the bottom. I'm going to turn off the puzzle mat. Then above the diffuse, we'll have specular and reflections. Both of those are going to want to be on a different blending mode. I'm going to put those on additive blending mode. Okay, so we've got those in there, and I'm going to turn off shadows for now too. There is our guys, and that should look something similar to, if I took a screenshot of the base beauty pass, it should look similar to comping these like that. And if I switch between them, you can see that yes, it is very similar. We're going to comp this in this way. Gives us a little bit more control so that we can control the reflections and the specular kind of independently if we need to dial them in a bit better. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my reference one at the bottom. I don't need the solid back there either. Let's make this puzzle mat more usable. I'm going to divide this into 3 channels actually to help us isolate the areas we need. So first I'm going to rename it Mat Astronaut, and we'll put a shift channels on that. And we're going to grab just the green channel. So I want to take red from green, take blue from green. Basically all of them are going to pull from green, which will allow us just to have a nice black and white mat. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this for the other things as well. So mat for the desk, switch them all to red. Let's do it one more time, and a mat for the books. We aren't going to be focusing on the books at the moment, but I'm just going to have it here anyway. All right, so we've divided that one out. So the puzzle mat's very usable with 3 different mats. I'm just going to go ahead and put these at the bottom, and we can source those with track matting later. All right, so we do need to make a nice alpha for these astronauts. First thing I'm going to do, before I select the mat for the astronaut for all of these, I'm actually going to go ahead and pre-comp these with this blending happening already. And we'll call this Astro CG Base. All right, so in there, we've just got these simple process that's adding specular and reflections. I'm gonna go back up to CG Astronauts, and now let's track mat to the astronaut. I want to switch it over to Luma, and now we have a beautiful alpha mat for them, looking great. Now we gotta worry about the shadows. So to add the shadows, what we could do, we're actually going to use these. I'll put these near the bottom. They're going to be used as a mat. There's a lot of different ways, again, that you can do this. But what I'm going to do this time is this black solid. I'm going to have that black solid source the shadows. So there we go. It's only applying the shadows. What I'm going to do here, just because they were all rendered together, I'm just going to do a quick matte here, kind of a garbage mask around the area I want it to be. I'm just going to check the end frame. We'll just do 1 keyframe here. All right. And I'll add a little bit of feather just in case. All right, so now we've got our shadow and everything in here. We'll kind of just throw this back into the main work. But before I do that, notice that these shadows are also adding shadows onto the astronauts. I actually want to not include their area for that. So what I can do is do a set mat. This allows us to do multiple track mats. This one's sourcing a layer like that. I can do the same thing by sourcing a layer using the effect, and I will pull the astronaut one. I'll need to switch this over to luminance, not alpha, and I might need to invert it so that it's only applying. Most importantly, I also need to make sure that I'm including effects and masks. There we go, because there's an effect on matte astronaut, which is where it's pulling the green. So it's important that when I use the set mat that I have it sourcing effects and masks. And that removes the shadows from their bodies. So now we have shadows just underneath them on the ground. All right, let's see how that looks in the comp. Let's go back up to the main work. I'm now going to turn on the base plate. I'll turn on the color, leave off the matte bars for now. Looking pretty cool there. They do need a lot of work still. They're very sharp, so we're definitely going to need to add some blur. Let's go ahead and add a camera lens blur like we've been using for other ones. Turn the roundness up. Sometimes what I like to do is not just the camera lens blur. I like to first add a tiny bit of softening before we're even dealing with the blur happening from the camera's focus. I'm just comparing it to the areas around them. to kind of get an idea of how the focal plane is in that region. It's subtle. And then there's some additional color correction and stuff we should do here as well. Looks like their shadows are getting a little bit too intense. I feel like they should not be darker than every other shadow in the plate. So we're gonna wanna lift those a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and put a levels on there. I'm gonna put it before the blurs. Maybe I'll try lifting a tiny bit of blue into the shadows. And then I'm gonna switch back to RGB and we're gonna lift a tiny bit of black overall. Start to lift those up until they hit just the right spot. I'm kind of looking for that nice, even, as I lift the exposure here, it should feel very natural with the way that their shadows go up compared to everywhere in the plate. Maybe I actually just want to pull these shadows down just a hair to like 80% opacity. At the end of the day, it is a lot of back and forth, getting this just right. It's also a lot of guessing, checking, and checking it from far away, checking it close up, checking all the different exposure levels. And you kind of constantly, it's almost like when you're driving, you're checking all your mirrors and always aware of what's going on. You're doing the same thing while you're comping. All right, we're gonna call it good there. That's looking pretty good. I think we'll leave them like that for now. We can always come back later once everything's kind of coming together and we can see how they're holding up. I might just add a tiny bit more blur in the shadows. I feel like it's bugging me a little bit here. Let's give it a whirl. Nice. Yeah, that helps. You don't really see any edges coming from that. I'll go ahead and put these in the pre-comps they belong in. All right, there's one more thing I want to do here. Down all the way in the CG base. Yeah, it's mostly in the diffuse here. I feel like the paint that's on them is almost neon bright. Actually, before I even do this, let me take a screenshot. See where we were. Let's see if we can get this a little better here. Yeah, that kind of takes a bit of that intensity away, which is kind of helpful, but I don't want to mess with any of the reflections. I feel like I want to keep all those. Let's go back to the main work. Ah, much better. Might not even need that hue sat anymore, honestly. Just by darkening them, that's helping them sit in there a lot better. All right, let's go with that. Let's go ahead and add the other CG, which is the book that'll go into this basket here in the foreground. All we'll do for this is just duplicate the astronaut CG pre-comp and adjust the matte channels so that the book is being matted correctly. The next thing we need to do is definitely bring back the basket here. We also need to blur these books accurately. Books are a lot more foreground, so they're going to need to go more out of focus. So similar to what we did with the astronauts, let's go ahead and add a very subtle fast blur first. I'm going to also add a camera lens blur, same values we've been using. I'm going to take a look at the books right around it, see if we have enough. Actually, it looks really good. It's somewhere right around there. It might actually be even a hair more. Let's work on getting the wireframe in front of it. So if I go into my Roto work, we've got our wireframe here. All right, let's see what happens if I took these CG books and matted them to that Roto mat. Same Roto mat that we used for the monitors over here. It's got a lot of these bits and pieces in it. So I'm using that same mat with a track mat. You'll immediately see that while it worked, it does not look great, just due to the nature of what's happening with the bright object that was behind the wire mesh in the original plate. Kind of bleeds around, especially in the defocused areas. So it kind of creates this not very accurate look now that we have a darker object that's supposed to be behind it. So we're not going to be able to use the Roto like we normally would. What I'm going to do instead, let's go into my Roto work, and I'm actually going to use this to bring back some fake kind of wire in the foreground. So I'm going to actually turn it off in here because we don't need it as a Roto anymore. I'm going to go ahead and copy this layer, paste it in the main work. Oh, immediately we have an issue. It's a 3D layer and there's no camera in here, so it's not working at all. I'm gonna need to also copy the camera. There we go. Now the layer is here. All right, so what I'm gonna do with this layer, I'm gonna change its fill, so that instead of it being red, we're gonna just turn it black for a second. I'm going to feather these masks a lot because now we're essentially painting in some fake wire mesh in front of the books here. Even with that small amount of work, it's already working better. Now what I want to do actually, I might try to pull a value to make sure I have the right color. It's not just black, it might have some other kind of tones in there. So I'm actually going to use the eyedropper. With my basket roto selected, the layer with its fill, I'm going to do an eyedrop, hold control so that it uses a larger sample size, and grab some part of dark part of this basket here. And my goal, there we go, is to just make sure I have the right color for this solid. I'm gonna go ahead and unsolo everything. Right now, this solid is going farther than it needs to. It's actually going beyond where the books are. And theoretically, I only need this to exist right where the books are. So I'm just going to tell this to track matte the CG books themselves. There we go. Now if I turn that on and off, you'll see that it's only impacting the area directly where the books are. So it's helping bring back that frame without adjusting parts of the plate that we don't need to adjust that are outside of the work area. One thing I'm noticing is that this wireframe has a little bit of a specular highlight on the top. So if I want to be fancy, we probably want to bring that back as well. All right, we're going to do it with layer styles. And I'm just going to quickly give it a little bit of bevel and emboss. As soon as you pop that on there, immediately it gives you a crazy result, but we can just dial that in. Interesting. Layer styles ignore track matting. Not in love with that. Okay, in that case, we're going to create, I'm just going to go ahead and pre-comp this then, and we'll call this our basket frame. We'll call it paint. If I solo that, there it is, okay. So I'm actually going to go ahead and go into here, do the layer style down in here. Oops. I don't want CG books here. My goal here is to do the layer style in here, then do the matting up one more comp. Let's go ahead and do another bevel and emboss. What I'm actually going to do, let me go up to the main work. I'm going to do the trick I did before. I'm going to lock that viewer, but also create another little viewer over here so I can see, while I'm working, I can see what it's doing. And I'm going to go ahead and adjust some of these bevel and emboss settings. Let's see, inner versus outer. I think I want, actually inner is interesting. I like inner. Adjust the angle. Yeah, just so it's catching kind of the top edge of all of those. Perfect. Size, let's make it much less. And adjust the depth, less there too. Really want to make it subtle. Maybe a little softening. Bring the opacity down. I think that's about all we need. Something like that. Actually, a little bit more opacity. Shadow, I actually don't want it doing any shadow, so I'm going to go ahead and turn shadow off. We just want to keep the value that we've got going on there. I think I'm kind of happy with that. It still feels like it's going too far, but 5%. No, it doesn't want to go any less far. I think it has to do with how much I feathered it. If we don't feather this quite as much, yeah, that definitely impacts the bevel and emboss quite a bit. Maybe we don't want to do the feathering here. Maybe we want to do the feathering up a comp. That way we can get the bevel and emboss just right in here. That should work. So back up in the main work here. Now I can go ahead and do the track matte that I was doing before with the CG books. Make sure the CG books are still on. There we go. Definitely I'm going to want to now add blur. Let's just actually go ahead and add the same values we added to the books. Let's go ahead and add those to the frame. Maybe this is actually an indication that this is too much. Let's go ahead and go with 4 camo blur and then 4 on the books. I think the books might have gone too far. I'm not going to do camera lens blur for the mesh. I'm just going to do a regular blur. Camera lens blur was kind of because of the optical effect it's doing. It's expanding the highlight too far. The highlight's getting just too out of control. So even this bevel and emboss, let's go ahead and bring that down. Maybe even more. Got a bit carried away there. All right, that's much better. Looks really natural in there now. So we've just got this fake just with a solid and a small bevel and emboss. We've kind of recreated the frame to go in front of it. Fits in really well. That's going to look great in the final shot. The books themselves still need a little bit of work. You'll see that they look good toward the top end, probably a little bright still, but the bottom end, we haven't figured out the shadow yet. So let's go ahead and get that in. So I'm going to go dive back into the books here. All right, what's going on with our shadow? All right, I'm going to go ahead and make a new mask. We're just going to do a quick mask just around the base of the books. And I'm going to do a keyframe at the start and a keyframe at the end. Perfect. All right, that immediately helped quite a bit, honestly. I think we can actually go in and tell our shadow in this case to be a little bit darker. There we go. I'd say the books are a little bit distracting right now. Overall, I think they're a little bit too bright. Maybe we'll just go in and, similar to before, we're going to just adjust. Oh, actually, let's see. A lot of this is actually coming from the specular. So I'm just going to darken that specular a bit. Let's see how that's going. That helped a lot, actually. Yeah, those are looking great. Right now, you can probably barely see it, but there is currently still no grain in the whole area where we have our CG, and there's no grain on our astronauts either. That's kind of the final polish. We're going to make sure that everything has that grain perfectly added back on. And that's really going to do that last little 5% to help it sit in there perfectly. That's looking pretty great. It's got these nice little highlight pings. Looks like it's being lit from the set. The astronauts being lit from the lamp. Perfect. Let's move right on to the last CG element we'll be adding. For this one, we will utilize Adobe's built-in Advanced 3D. Let's go ahead and bring in our model of a plant that we're going to put in the foreground. I'm going to go ahead and import that. Snake plant geometry here. It's a gltf file. You can see a little thumbnail showing us what the plant looks like. It's a super simple plant. No work has been done texturing it. It's kind of ready to accept kind of some lights in the scene. And we also know that it's going to be comped really dark. It's going to be in the foreground. It's going to be out of focus. But what's nice about using a 3D object for this, as opposed to a still frame, is that we'll get some nice parallax, hopefully, as the camera kind of moves past it. And you'll actually see the 3D quality of the plant in all the leaves. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start off a new comp by making a solid and pre-comping it immediately. We'll call it CG plant work. All right, we're going to hop in there. We're going to bring our plant in here. First thing it's going to do is maybe warn you. If the render engine wasn't set up in your comp settings, it's telling you that it's switching over to Advanced 3D. I'm going to go ahead and just leave all these default for now and hit OK. You can't see it yet. It's probably way too small in this scene, but we'll fix this in a second. So let's go ahead and bring in the camera and nulls that we've been using for everything else. This time around, I'm going to grab all of the track nulls, all 100 and such. I'm going to grab those and the camera together. I'm going to copy those, go to our CG plant work, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste them in here. I'm going to go switch to top view. This is going to be the most useful here for figuring out where we want to put this plant. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to hit this little shy guy and hide away a lot of the nulls that we'd hidden before. So our snake plant, by default, he is way over here. First, let's see what's going on with the scale. I'm just going to scale him up. I have to hold shift. Maybe I'll move the camera a little bit so we can see what we're doing. But yeah, I'm going to want to put him somewhere between the camera and the desk. Might err on the side of closer to the camera. Might give us some nicer parallax as we move past it. Checking the first and last frame to see how much movement the camera is doing. Let's try somewhere in that vicinity for now. Maybe lift him up a bit. Just kind of scale it to taste here. At the end of the day, you're never going to see the whole plant. You're just going to kind of catch a bit of it as you move by. So already you can see that he's 3D tracking with the scene, which is great. We've got the position in relatively the right location, somewhere between the camera and the desk. At this point, we can play around a little bit with the rotation, maybe find something that looks good. You just want something that has some nice little shapes of the leaves. Okay. Now what we can do here to make this really start to sing, because at the moment he looks very flat. So we should bring in an environment light. Oh, this should be organized. Put that in models, put that in pre-comps. All right, I'm gonna show you really quickly how to generate an HDRI that we can use to light the scene based on the actual plate. So I'm gonna go ahead and hop into our version of the denoise plate. We're gonna use this to help us generate the HDRI. It's gonna work great because it already has quite a bit of latitude. If I bring the exposure up and down, you can see that the lights in the scene, they have a pretty bright exposure. If I mouse over them, you can see in the upper right info panel that these are up really hot, up in the 5s, 6s. That brightness is going to come through in the HDRI really well to help light our object. So you actually really want those big bright areas. So I'm going to go ahead and take this pre-comp and duplicate it. We'll name it HDRI. I'm just going to delete out the other stuff. One thing I'm going to do first is make this wider so that it'll wrap around the sphere a little bit better so that we can rotate it into place. We don't need a huge resolution for this. I'm going to cut the 2160 in half. Let's fit this to height. All right, so I'm just going to leave this in the middle here for a second. And I'm going to do a quick paint/stitching thing here that's going to fill that out to the edges, which will help us wrap around this whole, we're kind of pretending this is an environment that's all the way around the camera, so that when we put our 3D object in, it'll get light kind of from the whole room. I'm going to use a reptile, set on unfold, We can expand out left and right. All right, so that does a quick kind of fixes the points at the edge there. It kind of starts to repeat back. Maybe I will do a solid based on some kind of dark wall color that's in the shot. Turn it down for a second, and maybe I will remove the duplication of our actor here, you know, remove these extra computers over here. We're kind of making up the rest of the room essentially, just for lighting purposes. You'll never see it beyond that. All right, so we've got that. That's looking good. There's a quick way we can kind of make sure that the edges don't have a seam on the far left and far right of the screen. We want it to be able to tile. We can quickly and easily do that just by doing an adjustment layer. We can put a transform on that and tell it to scale width, basically flop it. And if I just put a little mask on one of the sides, it's only showing that transform over there. What you're seeing on the far right is actually flopping over to the far left now, which is going to help with our seam. I can just feather this out. I actually like the idea that there's maybe another light that's coming in that's somewhere kind of off screen. All right, we're ready to make our HDR. So once you're happy with this, we're only going to be rendering out a single frame. We'll save frame as file. We're going to go ahead and go into our output module settings. We can leave this as preserve RGB or ACES CG. We're going to go into our format and we're going to do a radiant sequence, and that will create the .hdr file that we need. I'm going to quickly output this. Looks like I've already got a couple in there. I'm just going to increment this up, make a new one. All right, render that out. Now we can just pull that right back in, and we've got our .hdr file. I'm going to interpret it. ACES CG, that's what we know it's in. All right, so we've got that. I'm going to go ahead and put that into Elements, Images to keep organized. All right, now I'm going to drag it into our plant CG work. All right, I can turn it off for the moment, and we're going to go ahead and make an environment light now. Make a new light, environment light. I'm going to leave all the defaults for now, hit OK. And down in the light options, we can now change the source. I'm going to go change the source to that layer that we just brought in. And as soon as I did that, you'll notice that the plant got a lot darker. It's now pulling the lights from that environment. We can also adjust its intensity here. I want to change how much it's affecting the plant. Now, one thing we can also do if we want to position this correctly, you can adjust the rotation of the light. And as you adjust, say, the Y rotation, you're essentially kind of spinning it around in the environment to kind of line up how you want the light to hit our CG. But you can't really see what's going on. One thing that kind of helps with that, we've got a simple plain model of a chrome ball that was just kicked out as a gltf straight out of C4D with default everything, just pure reflective and metallic. I'm going to switch to top view. I'm just going to stick it right in front of the camera, somewhere easy to see if I keep it near the plant. And maybe I'll scale it up even more. And you can see immediately that it is reflecting the environment light that we have in our scene. So as I adjust my Y rotation on this, you can see it reflecting our HDRI. So if I want to position this accurately to what's going on in the scene and get the lighting right, it would be somewhere kind of in this range, where you can see that the part that is being reflected most is behind us, and that's kind of the area we've stitched. And then it's catching bits of the actor and the lights and stuff that are on the other side of the plant. For this scenario, you could kind of do it to taste. One thing I'm kind of looking for is like nice little specular highlights on the edges of the leaves. Maybe it'll catch little brighter areas. So it's kind of at this point, for this specific thing, this can be to taste. I actually really like the way that's catching the edges there. That looks nice. So we're gonna go with that. I can go ahead and just turn off this chrome ball. It's just used for reference here. Let's go ahead and RAM preview this, see how our plant's looking. Awesome. You can get some great bit of parallax here. If you watch along the leaves as the camera moves, there is some really nice natural parallax happening among the leaves, which you wouldn't get from anything but a CG object. And what's great about this is because it's all right here in After Effects, I can change its position on the fly, we can rotate it, we can change the lighting, we can do all that, and you can see it's rendering really quickly. So let's go ahead and see how that's looking in the main work. Cool. All right, so he's obviously way too bright. I'm just gonna go ahead and turn down the light. Let's actually see what it looks like if I just put it at 100. I'm gonna do a little bit of color correction just right here. Maybe we'll adjust the gamma a little bit. We wanna bring him down till it's at a point that's kind of in line with some of the darkest shadows in our shot here in the actual plate. That looks good. Obviously we'll need a bit of blur. I'm gonna toss the camera lens blur. We'll do the same settings we've been using for some other ones, and we'll crank this pretty high probably. Ooh, yeah. Love the way that the bokeh accentuates the highlights and the speck hits there. Looks great. Honestly, the plant color is looking pretty good as is. I do want to make sure he's not erring too far on the bluish side of green, but it looks pretty in line with what's going on with the other plant. I also want to make sure it's not just too saturated overall. There we go. And might go even darker. Really want to feel like it's silhouetted here in the foreground, where we're just catching those pings of light. What we can do if we want these highlights to really shine, we can actually just play with this a bit more. Kind of a balancing act of pulling the gamma down a bit while also crunching the brights. There we go. It's looking pretty good. He's probably a little bit too far into the frame here. I'm just gonna scoot it a little bit to the right. There we go. Not blocking quite as much now. Let's check out a RAM preview of just the plant on its own. If we increase the exposure and speed it up, you can really see the parallax that we're gaining from having a 3D object live in the scene. Cool, I'm happy with that. If the plant was any more visible in the final shot, we'd probably want to spend some time texturing the model.